The shade is all filled up. Hello, operator. We'll be ready to talk with Confidential magazine publisher Bob Harrison in just about 10 minutes. That's right. Would you please say it's Hi Gardner calling? Thank you, operator. Good evening. My name is Marilyn. I'm Hi Gardner's secretary, and we're calling from the office of the syndicated Herald Tribune columnist here in New York. Tonight, we'll be speaking with the controversial publisher of the Scandal magazine that had its trials and tribulations in California and has undergone a complete change in format. The man's name is Robert Harrison of Confidential magazine. I'll let Hi tell you about our other guest, Elvis Presley.
Well, I'd just like to say this. In all his career, Elvis Presley, now U.S. Army Private Number 533-10761, has sat for only one candid interview on live television. In this exchange of thoughts, the young man struck both ourselves and the TV audience as being a fine, decent, and respectful youngster. Now that he's in the employ of Uncle Sam, I thought that more people should get to know him a little better than to merely make their observations strictly from what they have read about. The kinescope we are about to unreel does precisely that. You'll meet Elvis Presley in just about 1 minute. Okay, Wes Kenny?
Hello? Hello, Mr. Robert Harrison?
Yes?
One moment, please. Hi, Gardner calling.
Yeah.
Hello, Robert.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine. How about yourself?
I feel swell. It's good to be talking to you again.
Yeah, you haven't been around your usual haunts lately, so it's good to talk to you on the phone. Robert, you made a comment, I'd say about a year and a half ago, that you actually welcomed lawsuits against Confidential magazine, and you said, and I'm quoting now, that you can't buy that kind of publicity. Well, you bought that kind of publicity for quite a while in Hollywood.
That's right.
Tell me, have you changed your mind now about publicity?
No. I'll tell you why, Hi, because lawsuits give us an opportunity, give Confidential an opportunity to prove the truth of the stories that we publish.
Mm-hmm.
And up to this date, I'd say that in our lawsuits, we've batted about 1,000%, proving the truth of the stories that had been published.
Have you got any lawsuits still pending, Bob?
There's litigation going on right now, yes.
Would you mind telling me about how much worth of the money that you made you tossed back into both the defending yourself against these suits and also those that you settled?
Well, I'd say it runs to the hundreds of thousands. I just don't know the figure. I wouldn't remember very well.
Bob, have you been to California since you and the law out there ended up in a tie?
No, I haven't had an opportunity, Hi. I'm hoping to go to California very soon, however.
What kind of a reception do you think you'll get?
I think I'll get a good reception. I've met a lot of the people from Hollywood here in New York, and we've gotten along very well. We always have, as a matter of fact.
That I will attest to. You always have. Then all of a sudden something flares up, and boom.
Right.
Bob, I have a tip-off that you are leaving for Cuba any day now to personally interview the rebel chief, Fidel Castro.
Well, Hi, here it is. We got an invitation, Confidential got an invitation to go down and see Fidel Castro. It happens, though, that Mr. De Castro wanted to see me himself. And I probably will be going down there in several weeks. I'm waiting for word from him to come down. And I assume I'll be seeing him in his headquarters in the jungle of Cuba, I guess.
Yeah, well, now the last time you were in the jungle in the Dominican Republic, somebody took a shot at you. You think you're going to be safe this time?
Well, I don't know. The thought is exciting, and more important, I believe we'll get a real scoop and a swell story for Confidential, so I'm going to take the chance.
I'm
That's
sure of that.
definitely.
Now, is Castro familiar with you and Confidential magazine?
He's apparently familiar with Confidential magazine. Obviously, he doesn't know me, but the invitation
I think
came
you're
from
being
him.
very modest.
The invitation came from him, High, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Are there any other personalities that you're going to expect to do in Confidential?
Yes, we're in the June issue of Confidential, incidentally, which will be on sale about April 14th. We're doing a story on Nathan Leopold. It's a story that none of the newspapers have printed, and it's called Nathan Leopold's Secret. It has to do with Leopold and Loeb, and it's something that Leopold, up to this point, has refused to talk about. In fact, he hasn't talked about it for 33 years.
Well, he doesn't talk about it in this story, does he?
He doesn't, but we do.
Uh-huh. Well, that sounds a little bit more like it. Bob, I've got a couple of copies here, and I think that the folks watching and listening are curious. I'd like to hold up a copy of the old Confidential,
Yes.
and also one of the new Confidential. First, the old one. Now, this dealt mostly in personalities. Was that right?
That's correct.
Now,
To a great extent.
the Confidential magazine currently on the stands for April is a far cry, you say, from the so-called exposés of what went on in the Hollywood bedrooms.
That's correct.
Now, what is the greatest single difference between your former format and the new one?
Well, let me put it this way, Howard. Actually, Confidential has not changed. It still dares to tell the truth. Formerly, Confidential emphasized the shenanigans and illicit conduct of celebrities. Now, however, Confidential goes behind the headlines for its stories. Stories that that I feel, the public should know. In other words, where we formerly pried and we beat, now we probe in the area of public affairs. It makes no difference where, industry, labor, sports, we're there probing.
Now, do you
That's
think that people are as interested in such stories as they were in the stories of stars?
I'm absolutely certain of it, High, because in the April issue of Confidential, which is on the stands now, and which completely eliminated exposés of the private lives of individuals, our sales have gone pretty far, pretty high.
How much worth of circulation did you lose after the trial, Bob?
We lost about 1 million, but it looks like we're picking it up again.
Now, losing 1 million would put almost
We'll
any
bring
other
it down.
magazine out of business. What is your circulation
Well,
now?
our circulation now, High, is 3 million. We had been at the 4 million mark.
Gosh, I didn't realize that.
That's right.
Went up quite that high.
And I honestly believe that we're going to go higher than the 4 million mark. Now, this is said in all sincerity, not for advertising purposes.
Well, now during the old days when you were really letting stars have it,
Yeah.
you and your staff weren't able to buy any personal life insurance. Now that the format has changed, can you buy insurance?
I don't know. I haven't checked. I question it because we're still hitting pretty hard in other avenues of public affairs. We may have gone out of the area of private affairs, but public affairs represent certain dangers too, as you can readily understand.
Do you think that the private affairs that Confidential popularized, and you really did with 4 million copies each issue, that the interviewer who was sort of an inquisitor on TV, do you think that you were responsible for the birth of that type of interview?
Unfortunately, I've always felt that Confidential gave birth to what I call the inquisitor type of interviewer. But in their case, I feel they sort of lead the lambs to slaughter, so to speak.
Now, another thing that was interesting, and I did a column on this in the Trib back on February 25th, and I called it We the People. And I mentioned in here that I thought it was an odd thing that even though Confidential magazine has had to change its format since the California trial, A great many of our finest magazines and newspapers and syndicates are running the same type of stories that you did, and yet nobody seems to mind. How do you feel about that?
That's true. I appreciated the column when you ran it. The only difference, of course, is...
I didn't run it for your appreciation.
The only difference is that the magazines you speak of go right to the horse's mouth and get the stories right from the person themselves, whereas in our case, we, through our far-flung organization, were able to pick them up ourselves.
Bob, they weren't flung far enough from what some of these people had to say.
Now, wait a minute. I want to make a point here, Hi. You said something about being forced to change our format. That is incorrect. We, for a long time before the trial in Hollywood, had planned to change our format, the format of Confidential, because we felt that the public was sort of getting satiated with stories on the antics.
Bob, would you let me interrupt you a second?
Yeah.
I'm looking at you at a monitor, and I think your hands on the receiver are hiding your face, and I'd like to see your face. That's better.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
That's a shame, after I shaved so carefully. Now, here's the point, we were not forced to change our format. We had toyed with that idea. Then the trial came along, and we couldn't change it because it would look as though we were doing something wrong, and we were not. We waited until the trial was over. And then we switched our organization, and that is all over the world. We're going after stories behind the headlines. This is something I had planned more than a year and a half ago.
Now, Bob, when Confidential first began, you claimed it was a crusading expose magazine. You still think so?
I have always felt that, High, and I could quote any number of stories that would back that up, but I don't think we've got the time to go into that on here.
Well, now, Confidential also spawned a great many imitators. A number of magazines are on the stand, and I understand that you published a few copies of Confidential yourself. Now, what has happened to all these publications?
Well, as I had anticipated when we had planned to change our format, those so-called expose magazines that still continue doing the private lives of people have fallen to practically nothing. I don't think the top circulation of any one of those imitators of Confidential is more than, at the most, 200,000.
You said so-called expose. What's the difference between so-called expose and the kind that people are used to reading as fact?
The difference is that when Confidential did that type of story, it did a very complete story that was thoroughly investigated, whereas what I call the so-called expose magazines are merely magazines that publish rehashed stories that have appeared from time to time in the newspaper.
You once told us about some of the famous people who subscribed to the magazine. I wonder whether you mind recalling a few of them.
Oh, sure. Sophie Tucker, for one, General LeMay of the Marines, the late...
That's quite a follow.
The late, is it Alfred Kinsey? Is that his first name? I don't remember.
Dr. Kinsey.
Dr. Kinsey. One of the Fords, I don't know which one. Any number of people in all, I would say in all top branches of American life.
Did any of these people, of course those who are still alive, cancel their subscription?
They have not. That's the amazing thing. You mean with the new format?
Uh-huh.
Absolutely not.
Not so much the new format as much as, all of the publicity that you said you liked so much.
No, we continue to get letters of approbation about the old Confidential, and as a matter of fact, about the new one too. I think it's become a part of Americana.
That I will definitely agree with you. A New York Post series some time ago said that you worried about getting an ulcer, and you showed symptoms of being a hypochondriac despite your apparently sound health. Are you a hypochondriac?
Well, in a sense, yes. I've worried about it getting an ulcer ever since I've been 12, long before Confidential. That is the sort of thing I want to avoid. A lot of people think that it's the tenseness of Confidential. That's not true.
Now, I saw you at Lindy's the other day, and I noticed that you have a brand new convertible Lincoln car. It's white, it's wide open, your hair floats in the breeze, and yet you are one of the people that an awful lot of other people would think would like to be inconspicuous. How come you roll around that way, Bob?
Well, number one, I love the car. Number two, I don't have any fears of anyone because I don't feel I've ever done anything wrong. So, and I like big, good-looking automobiles.
Now, that there was a time in the past when a few people did try to take a poke at you.
Yes, in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, well, that was a little bit more than a poke.
Yeah. That's happened.
Incidentally, Dick Weldy dropped me a note the other day. He was the man who shot you, and oddly enough, he said to send his regards to you, and I'm doing that publicly.
Well, it was on your own program right here that Weldy and I sort of became friends again, I remember.
That's right.
Isn't that true?
Uh-huh. And if you remember, I had a bodyguard there at the time just to make sure that you did become friends.
You know, it's a funny thing, Hi. It's a very funny thing that every time there's a crucial change in the life of Confidential, I wind up on your show.
Well, that's the entire idea, and I hope that you don't wind up for another year with it, because if you got the right format now, this could be interesting, and you could render a public service if you really wanted to, and I think you're on the right track.
That's exactly what we're trying to do. We've really broadened our outlook.
You made a fortune on Confidential, and one of the things that amazed me is that you persisted in publishing it despite all the harassment and embarrassment and pressure that you underwent.
That's right. It's because I believed in what I was doing, Hi. I always have. And if you feel that what you're doing is right, I imagine that no amount of harassment could stop you. That's about it.
What do your close friends or your family, Bob, think of you as the publisher of a Scandal magazine?
Well, I've often wondered what my family thought of me, but on the other hand, I feel that since 4 million Americans bought Confidential, that it was a very acceptable publication. And I would assume that my close friends and family would go along.
Now, I had a tip-off some time ago that you received an offer of $2 million to sell Confidential.
That's right. That was about a year ago.
Now, this is before you really got into the ulcer-making troubles. How come you didn't sell?
Publishing Confidential is very exciting business, plus the fact that I feel that we have done a lot of good, and I feel we're going to do more good, and I want to continue doing it. It's much more important to me than money itself, believe it or not.
Bob, I think that I'd like to ask this question.
Yeah.
The name Confidential is both an asset and a liability, I would presume. Do you think that at any time in the future you might change the name?
Oh, I never would change the name. As I said before, I think it's a part of Americana. I think it's going to live long after I'm gone. Which I hope won't be for long.
Bob, what do you think you'll be doing 5 years from today?
Well, you know, I've often wondered, maybe one of these days I'll become a columnist. I don't know. You think that's possible?
I think you've got some pretty good background for it.
Who knows?
I think that what you'd be trying to do is daily what you used to do semi-annually.
Well, actually, though, I think 5 years from now we'll still be publishing Confidential all over the world.
Now, a lot of people, both friends and enemies and attorneys, have given you advice. What would you say in about the 30 seconds that we have left to talk is the best piece of advice you ever got?
The best piece of advice I ever got from my attorneys, as a matter of fact, is to continue to publish Confidential in this new broadened format that we have, and do some good with the very, very wonderful circulation that Confidential has.
Well, Bob, thank you very much. It was fine talking with you, and when you get down to Cuba, I hope you get yourself some swell stories and come back feeling fit.
Thanks a million, Hyde.
Bye now.
Bye.
Well, folks, I hope you found our kinescoped interviews with Elvis Presley and Bob Harrison, the publisher of Confidential, fascinating. I'd like to invite you to tune in again at the same time next Wednesday night for a highly interesting telephone get-together with one of the most successful showmen and MCs in television, together with his lovely wife, Sylvia and Ed Sullivan. Thanks so much, and good night now.